Well, it's that time of the year where everybody's trying to frighten you, especially in real estate. So let's cut through the BS and tell some stories on today's Unnamed Real Estate Podcast. Well, hi there. My name is Charles Ray Dawson. I'm the Associate Broker Residential Sales Manager at ProStar Realty. This is the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast, episode 247. So, getting really close to that 250 mark. I think I need to change some stuff up for 250. So, I got 2 more weeks to do it and a whole bunch of miles to travel between now and then. Let's see if I can actually get it done. So, hope everybody's having a really good week. Yeah, I'm rocking and rolling over here. So, let's just get to it. So, last week we got a little national news, got a little local news, got a little international news. Not a lot of news going on, except the Fed did drop the rate again, the prime rate by a quarter. What's really interesting is apparently Tuesday was the lowest point in 2025 for interest rates. In fact, one of my clients locked in a loan rate at 5.75, which is pretty damn good. That's the magic 5 number we've been talking about. And he went and got himself really lucky on that one because he locked it in, and then the Fed dropped dropped their rate a quarter the next day, and mortgage rates went up. So there is a serious line of thinking out there that is talking along the lines of how the mortgage rates, they track with a 10-year, but they're also a 30-year fixed, which means if I'm loaning you money, right, I have to loan you the money with the understanding that in 30 years, 20 years from now, I'm still going to be stuck with whatever rate that is. All right, you're going to be loving it. All right, because I have an interest rate that starts with a 2. I'm never getting out of that. In fact, every time you hear that the inflation is over 3%, I'm actually sort of making money from a paperwork standpoint, because my mortgage payment every month is a little bit less, even while paying interest on what I owe, than that. And that's a losing proposition for banks. So the concept is that as long as, we do not have any plan in the future to get out of this debt. And I remember 10, 15 years ago, going into seminars and stuff, and they were talking these numbers. Yeah, we currently owe $20 trillion in debt, right? But we have 120 trillion on the books that we know are coming downstream when the boomers retire. So, in my mind, I'm always thinking 120. So, and I think we're at 34 right now. Might be 37. I got 2 numbers in my head right there. And so when you're tracking that out, and the number one way a country gets out underneath crippling debt is they run inflation up. Right? There's a really good argument that was one of the things about the 80s when we were looking at that stagflation on, is that it actually reduced our debt that was occurred during LBJ's Great War on poverty and whatnot, and the debt run up during the Vietnam War. And so we were able to sort of maneuver that off the books by saying, yeah, we owe $50 billion, all right, but $50 billion today is not what $50 billion was back during 1975. So you inflate it, so the value of the dollar is worth less, so the amount that you owe is technically worth less. So if you are loaning money out, you need to think about these things. Is this interest rate today not just going to make me money today, but is it going to make me money for the life of the loan? And that seems to be what's kicking up and keeping these interest rates at that level. So I also mentioned last week about how, and I mentioned this in a little sales meeting yesterday, that even though we as real estate agents have been told time and time again, just tell them that this is average for over a 50-year curve. And I'm like, well, that's really hard to say that this is the average over a 50-year curve to a 30-year-old because they only have their lived life experience of their life, right? And in that case, we're at the highest for the last 20 years, right? So if you have a 30-year-old first-time home buyer out there, they don't start paying attention to the world until they hit 7, 8, 9, right? And even then, it's a very nebulous thing until they get out in the world. So these are the highest interest rates they've ever seen in their adult life, and it's impacting them. So what does that mean to you? We are at where we are at, so we need to work the now. And how do we work the now? Well, first we need to know exactly where we are now, so let's get going with these numbers real quick so I can get them out of the way, and then we'll tell some stories. So, numbers for this week are recorded on October 29th, 2025. Actives of that day were 25,623, up 104 from the previous week. New listings were 2,018, which actually came down 286. Our contracts are 2,222, up 121, and our closings last week were 1,435, and coming soon to an MLS near you is 517 new listings. So once again, we have that weird little situation where we have less inventory coming in. Okay, we went down 286, contracts went up a bit to 121, but actives went up 104. How does that work out? Houses returning to the market. Right, a couple houses were put temporarily off market, right, during the holidays. They start coming out, they would not show on this except as a bump in the active. Right. Other thing on that is houses returning because they went under contract and then they fell out and now they're back on market. Right, that would also impact the active. So, but that's why we watch the Cromford numbers, right? Our supply is raised to 103.1, up from last week. Our demand actually also went up. Last week that was at 80.3, and now we're at 80.7. So we're up almost half a point in demand, probably because of the interest rates. But because we got more houses than we got that, once again, we are sliding more into buyer territory at 78.3. And we can break it down to our individual cities and whatnot. And except for Tempe and Cave Creek, and I'm sort of skimping on Cave Creek right there. We're starting to look at single digits, change over change. This is usually a sign that we see that the market's, slowing down, bottoming out, not going in the directions as fast as they were before. All right, and Tempe's Tempe. They always act weird, all right? But Fountain Hills, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale, Chandler, and Gilbert, and Avondale are all still leading the pack in the seller territory. All right, and then our balanced markets at Cave Creek, Mesa, Phoenix, Glendale, Tempe. All right, those are your balanced markets. And then our sellers markets are Peoria, Goodyear, Santan Valley, Surprise, Queen Creek, Buckeye, and Maricopa. Buckeye's still working its way up, but they still have a long way to go before they get into a balanced market. Not expected, probably not until the end of next year, if they ever do pull out of that. And we definitely need to start seeing some other stuff happen. So, for people who are waiting for the bottom, we're still not going to have a bottom, although the Case-Shiller Index did come out, and we all know what we think about the Case-Shiller Index, saying that we're probably, year over year, Phoenix home prices have dropped about 1.5 percentage points. All right, so your $400,000 house, right, if it drops, that, it's now worth $394. All right, that's an adjustment. Not a serious adjustment. Usually adjustments are considered to be 5 or 10. And this is mostly just because of, interest rates not allowing buyers into the market, people with interest rates not willing to move out. All right, and big institutional investors are not coming in here and sweeping up the whole subdivisions like they were talking about. Funny thing that somebody was at a sales meeting was mentioning that they had somebody handing out brochures at the grocery store saying, vote against build to rent subdivisions. Now, there's no bill out there that I'm aware of currently because state office is closed down. But someone, going out there saying, oh, we don't want these big people coming in here and doing these build to rent subdivisions. I haven't gone that far deep into that to have an opinion on that one way or the other. All right, we need housing. All right, so building any kind of house is a good thing. We need affordable first-time homes so people can get on the escalator and start earning equity. Right. You could just build those houses to rent and then sell, right, at like a normal new build subdivision. And that's one way of doing it, which would increase supply, decrease costs, all right, theoretically, all right. But ultimately, if you need people in housing, all right, and a lot of people still aren't, they just don't want to buy, or they're not in a position yet, but they would still like to rent a house and not an apartment. So, well, we'll see how that one's going out. So, one of the other fun things that happened this week is my Facebook memories came out and reminded me that I had done a video many episodes ago where I was talking about haunted houses, right? I shared it on Facebook and stuff, and of course, like Facebook does, it didn't share the link to the old video, so I had to include that later on in the post below. But for you people who follow me on Facebook, you guys can find that. But it's Halloween, and like I said, I hear all the scary real estate stories, right? Agents are trying to be scared, and people are using scare tactics to get agents to buy on. If you're not buying our new AI-driven CRM, you're going to be left in the dust. Books are getting there saying, hey, real estate is the new white-collar industry that AI is going to destroy. I personally think lawyers are going to go first, all right? Simply because, AI has yet to figure out how to deal with emotion. And real estate is a very emotional thing. And occasionally you need to talk somebody down off the ledge. And yeah, chatbot isn't going to be able to do that. In fact, I'm sort of terrified what happens if they ever start doing chatbot as, like suicide hotline chatbot. So, but, so we got that going on. We got people scared of, BlackRock's going to come and buy all of our houses and this and that and the other thing. And these people over there, they're going to import them all from foreign countries, and they're going to move them into the neighborhood next to you. Next to you, you're going to be listening to weird music at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. A lot of scary stuff. All right. That's life. Deal with it. So, but the other beautiful thing about this week, being the week of Halloween, is one, we keep to the old ways in my house, so I will be passing out stuff to the little gremlins that show up. All right. I'm not a fan of trunk or treat. My post is doing a trunk or treat, and everybody wants to say, just bring your stuff down to our trunk or treat. And it's like, no. That's Halloween night is the Super Bowl for properly free-ranged feral children. Right? I'm not saying driving, following the kids in your car. Okay, I'm like, when they get to a certain age, you send them loose into the dark. All right, get them to figure out, make game plans. Where are we going? How are we going to get that? All right, what's the cost-benefit analysis of going down that particular road? Well, yeah, there's only one light on that, but that's that lady who passes out full-size candy bars. Let's go down there. Yeah, but then we got to walk by the scary house with Boo Radley in there. I think these are important things for children, like, to experience, to grow. I think a lot of hypersensitive young people today who cannot overcome things, it's because they didn't get to go trick-or-treating. All right, so we're going to be sitting out there handing out stuff to people, and I will grab a bag of real candy. All right, I'm completely on board with the, hey, let's give kids that are not candy, but deep down inside, like every once in a while, I just want to slip somebody some M&Ms. Especially if their mom shows up in the sexy cat suit. So, another really great reason to do Halloween at home, and be the one handing out the candy, because some of these mothers out there, you can tell they're looking for either another baby daddy or somebody to, help raise their kids. All right? We used to call them Insta families back when I was dating. So, but that's beside the point. You guys are going to go out there, have a great Halloween. If you give out candy, give out candy. If you don't give out candy, turn the lights out, hide in your bedroom, right? Hope the kids don't egg your house. That's the other thing we need to bring back. It's called trick or a treat. Pay up. So, other thing I saw trying to research news for someone to say is Inman, my serious news source for all things real estate, had a little article about ghost stories. And they had people who work for their company tell their best real estate ghost stories. So I'm not going to read you all of them. All right, I'm just going to give you a little highlight of one. All right. So Dramatic reading by Ray Dawson. Hold on. Yeah, that probably just blew the lighting out on the shot altogether. This is from the Inman article, and this story is called The Littlest Ghost with an Attachment. Inman Director of Customer Success, gotta hate modern job titles, Jasmine France moved to her 1875-era house with her family about 6 years ago, and for the first year, things were pretty peaceful. At that time, her 2 children were ages 1 and 4. Once her daughter Sierra was just old enough to talk a bit and crawl around on her own, she started repeating something strange. Baby monster wants my Biko. Her Biko is what she calls her pacifier. After she said it multiple times, I was like, who's this baby monster? Where do you see baby monster? And she would point to the doorway, and then, what color is baby monster? Probably thinking about Sesame Street. All right, and she would say white. I think baby monster is... Isn't Elmo the old baby monster? Okay, just one, sorry, segue. And she would say white, and I was like, that's weird. But maybe she saw something on a show or whatever. But one night when Jasmine and her husband Brandon were hanging out around the kitchen after the kids had gone to bed, they heard what sounded like a child laughing and running around upstairs. Why is it always children laughing and running around upstairs? It got so loud that me and Brandon both stopped what we were doing, looked at each other like, wow, Sierra must have gotten out of her crib. So Brandon went to the stairs and put Sierra back to bed, but stopped in his tracks at the foot of the stairs and turned pale. And he was like, I saw an oblong-shaped shadow go up the stairs, and he was shook. Jasmine relayed. So I pulled out the baby monitor right away and looked, and Sierra's in her crib, asleep. Brandon decided to go see his mom's psychic, who is very much a believer, although Jasmine and Brandon never had been before this. And immediately when he walked into the room, the psychic announced, who's this little person following you around? The psychic said the ghost had been in the house for a long time and was sorry for scaring her kids and just wanted to live in the home peacefully, but didn't like something that had been changed in the house recently. The psychic also said the spirit seemed to be attached to Brandon in particular. As it turned out, Brandon had been removing the home's old doorknobs and hinges and restoring them because they had been painted over several times over the years. So, I do love me a good ghost story. I wish I could have come up with something better than that. The other one had to deal with, also old house basement. We don't have basements in Arizona. And strange feelings of being watched in the presence and whispering noises in the background. I don't know if you've ever sat there in the middle of the house at night and just listened to the whispering noises. I do know my VFW post, if you're like going there to open up the place and the lights are all dark in the canteen and you start flipping them on one by one and all of a sudden you see 2 people at the end of the bar in uniform. It can be a little creepifying. Or it could have been that Andrew and Melody decided to set up a couple skeletons in uniform at the side just as a Halloween decoration, but failed to tell you that. And the problem is that the skeletons are right next to those little auto defibrillators we have to keep because we got a bunch of old guys. But yeah, that was a little shocking. I think everybody's got a ghost story. This is where, if I was a professional podcast, I'd be saying, please leave your best story in the show notes below. Your grandfather told me a great ghost story about when him and Grandma moved into the very first place. How when they're staying in this little 1-bedroom apartment, when they'd go to bed, they always get the feeling that there's somebody staring at them from the doorway. And then later on, they found out that their apartment was an addition onto the back of the building, and that doorway used to be a window where a previous resident used to sit there and just stare out the window. I had this incident one, and I'm just straight up. It wasn't my first apartment, but it was an apartment. It was my first one I had myself in a very old building downtown Salt Lake. And I would go to sleep, and I'd get the feeling in the middle of the night that somebody was running their fingers through my hair. Just like that. Not like seriously, just lifting up the strands over and over and over again. And it'd wake me up. and a little weird at first. Like, wow, I just woke up like somebody was running their fingers through my hair. And it happened for a couple weeks. And didn't think much about it. Well, my sleep schedule's getting a little disrupted because I'm constantly waking up with people freaking stroking my hair in the middle of the night. And so I'm sitting there, I'm trying to go to sleep, and I just nod off, and the hair stuff starts again. And I got so pissed. I raised up out of my bed and basically said, will you effing leave me alone? I'm trying to freaking sleep here. And then I realized I was shouting in the middle of a dark room. Feeling foolish, went to sleep, never had the hair problem again. Alright. That's neither here nor there, but it's just a fun story. So, but go through all 247 episodes that I put out there. Find the one where I talk about haunted houses and stuff. It's actually I think it holds up. I liked it, especially earlier production values, earlier location. It was definitely not this office. It was the one on 23rd. Still me. I've aged well, and still has the good hardcore real estate information you've always wanted to hear. Right. A couple things it doesn't have. Doesn't have me telling you to watch children and pets around the water. Right. Also doesn't say don't drive in anything flooded. Right. That's new. Right. I definitely had not come up with my circle theory. But like always, work your circles. Right. Try to have a really good weekend. Call your mother. You guys have a great day. Right.